Alrighty. Hey everybody, how are you doing today? So my name is Jeff Fagan, and right here today we're going to talk about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Sorry, you're going to see me looking back and forth at the screen, as this is where I have all the info of the chat and what's going on. As you can see, I'm actually not using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. That is a long name. But I'm not using that to do the stream today. I'm actually using, weird enough, a Zcam E1, which with the sale they did, I guess at this point a year ago, on B&H, it's my favorite webcam for sure. But that's not what we're talking about today. So here's the Blackmagic. I'll turn this puppy on. One of the things I wanted to talk about in the stream today, which is a little bit different from what I've seen most of the talk about. A lot of people are testing out batteries. They're testing out a lot of third-party batteries for this camera, and I want to let you know you got to be careful with doing that. This is actually, believe it or not, my second Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. My first one, I did the same everyone else. I was trying third-party batteries just like this one, which actually works okay. It gets like 30 minutes. But I was testing other brands, and one of the brands I tried, I believe it was like Ula. It got an hour of power in the Blackmagic, but taking the thing out of the battery compartment, holy moly, that thing would not come out. So actually what I had to do is I had to get a screwdriver to pop that thing out, and I noticed once it was done, there were certain little things happening. Weird enough, I had a line through the screen, which was not super noticeable, but it was noticeable for me, and so I wasn't happy with that. And also, the charge port was not working properly, and it wasn't showing if it was charging a battery when it was connected or not. So basically, what I want to get at first is, if you're getting this camera, you're waiting to get this camera, be careful with using third-party batteries. They can damage the camera. And I think, you know, the few dollars you spend to get the better battery is worth it. Now to the second topic of today. One of the things I want to talk about is that I was finding the batteries out there just aren't enough. I don't want to carry 20 LPE6 batteries, even if they last an hour each. A lot of what I'm doing right now is documentary work, and you know, I don't need 10 hours worth of power, but I need at least 2 to 3. And you know, this is the let me take out the battery that comes with the Blackmagic. So the Blackmagic comes with a proprietary, I guess it's made by Blackmagic LPE6 battery. It's this one right here. This one lasts about an hour, give or take. It really just depends on, I think, the complexity of the movements in your scenes with how much power it's using. It's been okay. However, you know, one battery that lasts me an hour isn't enough. I got another one that lasts me an hour. That still isn't quite enough. So I want to show you guys actually what I made. I took the power cord, and here's the power cord that comes with the Blackmagic. Let's see right here. So this is the power cord that comes with the Blackmagic. You'll see it's all tied up. And the reason it's all tied up is I actually spliced a different power adapter that I needed with the original power brick that came with the Blackmagic. If you know how to splice, it's definitely helpful. I do want to put a little disclaimer in here, though. If you don't know how to splice cords, I wouldn't go for it, because if you don't know how power regulation works and voltages, you could damage the camera. So anyways, what I did was cut it all the way at the power brick, and as you can see, let me put this up right here, put it right here. This is where I made the splice, and I actually spliced it to a 2.5 millimeter input. Let's see. You know what? Let's do this. Come on. I guess it doesn't go up that close. All right, so here we go. So it's a 2.5 millimeter input, and the sorry, let me put you back on me. So part of the reason I did this 2.5 millimeter input is so I can use external power sources. So we've got this cool little XT Power. By the way, this isn't an endorsement. This is something I bought a while ago for my Oh, sorry. I'm gonna finish this and then I'll get to your question, Prospect. I got this XT Power when I actually had the original Blackmagic Pocket, and I use this to power the camera. The reason you can is if you look right here, it actually has an output that outputs. You can choose either 12 volt or 9 volt. So it outputs actual DC power. So I wanted to use this for the Blackmagic. To be fair, I'm only getting about 2 hours from this. It is only a 10,000 milliamp battery, but 2 hours plus the two Blackmagic batteries I have, that's quite enough right now for a shoot. And now, Prospect Protection is asking which gimbal fits this camera. So from my experimentation, I only have a Ronin M as far as my proper gimbal. It does fit on the Ronin M. However, it doesn't clear between the two bars. So the only way you can mount it on a Ronin M is you actually have to mount the Blackmagic to the plate while the plate's actually on the Ronin M. So it is hard. It's not as easy as, like, you know, taking a GH5 and, you know, sliding the GH5 through the gimbal like you're supposed to on the plate. But it is possible to use the Blackmagic on the Ronin M. It's not the best solution, but it does work. I have seen the Blackmagic work on the Ronin S as well. I've seen some interesting mounting solutions. I've actually seen at NAB, they had what's normally the bottom, how you normally mount the Ronin S on the bottom piece. They actually rotated the bottom piece to the top, since you obviously have this top mounting piece right here on the Blackmagic. And they were able to mount it top-wise with this, and it was working fine for them. The other thing I've seen people do, which isn't necessarily what I would do, but I can understand why, because of the way this camera is angled, some people are actually on the Ronin S mounting this bottom up, top, from the top to the bottom plate. So the camera is actually on there upside down, but they're just flipping the image in post. So I mean, it does work if you want to do it like that. However, I recommend there's also an offset plate you can get for the Ronin S. I would get the offset plate. I would just try to keep this upright, because at least for me, you know, you have the controls and everything here, and if you need to access them, it's easier if it's all in the upright position you're normally used to, versus, you know, having it upside down and trying to have to figure it all out while it's on a gimbal that's on. It's just not advisable. But it is possible to mount this thing on different gimbals. I guess that comes to the next point. This thing is much, much lighter than you would expect it to be. I really do like the camera overall. When you pick this thing up, it's really light, and, you know, to give some people credit to what they're saying, it does feel a little cheap. Especially when compared to like a GH5 that has like a nice sturdy feel to it. But, and again, I hate to do what everyone else does, for the price point of this camera and what it offers, I'm willing to take the cheap feel, especially because the screen on this thing is absolutely amazing. I just can't get over how great it is. Fujifilm X-T3 or Blackmagic 4K, which is better? You know, I really think that is up to what you're doing. I guess with that kind of a question, I'll move on to the next idea I had with this camera, where this is pretty much a cinema camera in all aspects. It's not a DSLR. And what I mean by that is, with DSLRs, you get certain conveniences, such as battery life, ease of use, quick turning on with the power, being able to just whip it out and start filming, run and gun, for instance. Originally, I wanted to get this and phase out my GH5 and get another one, but after using this for a few weeks, I love it. For narrative and documentary work, this is my go-to camera for sure for now on. Absolutely, hands down. But when I'm running gunning, there's just a little bit to it that, you know, the GH5, and I would assume with the XT3, because I haven't had much experience with it, but the GH5 being more similar to the XT3 other than sensor size, these DSLRs or DSLMs, mirrorless cameras, they're a lot quicker in the field to set up. So depending on the kind of work you're doing, that's kind of what I would go with. If you're some people are gonna hate on me for this, but if you're a wedding videographer, I probably wouldn't recommend the Blackmagic. I probably would still recommend a DSLR, DSLM. They're just easier to go, to run and gun, to get the shots you need. And when you're doing events and live work where, sometimes that one shot, if you miss it, that was it, you missed it. The Blackmagic, most of the time when I'm using it, you got to set up the shot. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but when I'm using this, it's always setting up the shot. So you have to kind of know going into this what you're going to use it for. So if you're used to DSLRs, I wouldn't kind of jump into the Blackmagic and say, this is going to be my camera, this is going to be the be-all camera for everything. It's a tool. Every camera is a tool, and they have different uses. Like the GH5S is good in low light. You have the A7S, great in low light. The A7R is great at taking photos and video. It's an amazing hybrid. I almost think of the GH5 as a great hybrid camera, because not a lot of people talk about the stills, and the stills on it are amazing. Stills on the Blackmagic are actually okay. I will tell you a few issues I have with taking stills on this Blackmagic. Forget the fact that it's all 8 megapixel. This is a cinema camera. It's not meant to take stills. But there is a dedicated, let me take this thing off the rig, and I'll show you guys the photo button. Let's take this off. I guess one thing I'll point out too while I'm taking this off, I do have a Metabones, but I also have a Viltrox adapter, and the Viltrox, at least with the 18 to 35, works pretty well on the Blackmagic. I don't get any focusing. The focusing does not work, but I don't really need it. I use this follow focus with the focus ring, so for me, I don't really need autofocus on this thing. But anyways, back to what I was saying before. Let me go over here so I can get this thing focused on in. So the Blackmagic, it has this photo button right here. It's a dedicated still button when you want to take stills. However, when you take stills, it's a small, what's it called? It's like a small little icon that pops up, and it just basically is like a small still camera icon. And I guess that's just to let you know that it took the picture. When you have a dedicated stills button, I would kind of like to see more of more of an acknowledgement that you took the still, because I just experimented yesterday. I went to a birthday party. I actually brought the Blackmagic with me. And I just took some video, took some stills. And a lot of the stills I took didn't come out in the folder. I'm using just for regular video and stills, I'm actually using this Lexar that I used on the GH5. This Lexar, they stopped making them, I think because Lexar kind of went out, but they were doing some great deals on them, especially if you could get them used, because they got the dual pin, and on the GH5 they were able to record all of the modes. Using this on the Blackmagic, so far it's been able to record everything in ProRes up to 30p, and it's been able to record some of the 60p. I've tested up to 422. I have not tested HQ, but it's been able to handle that. It does not handle RAW at all. 30p, 60p, this thing does not handle it. Whereas I actually have another card. Let's see if it's over here. Where did that card go? Oh, I know where it is. It's in my GH5. It's a Delkin, and a lot of people were talking smack about this Delkin, but it's let's do this. It's right here. This Delkin, it's a V90 card. It records pretty much everything except for lossless 60p RAW. I was so surprised how well this works with recording all the formats. Now, I only have a 64 gigabyte card, so how much is that really going to hold? But it was interesting to see that an SD card, even though it was a 2-pin SD card, an SD card was able to handle all of pretty much what I needed, because I haven't really had the need to shoot 60p RAW yet. Let's see what else I could talk about before we end this stream for today. Let's see, what's the main reason this camera can't be used in a wedding. So Indian Studio, the main reason, let me clarify. It's not that it can't be used in a wedding. It's that there are a lot of cameras that are better suited to be used in a wedding. Because this camera, you have to kind of set up everything, and it's not as easy just to run and gun with this. Like I said earlier, sometimes you just miss that moment where when you have a DSLR, you have the ease of autofocus. You have a little bit easier ways to expose and just get on really quickly. And with those features for a wedding or for an event, I would choose a DSLR or DSLM mirrorless over this, just because they have some features that make it easier just to run and gun on the go. This is, like I said before, a straight up cinema camera. There's push autofocus, but that's not really good in a bind. That and the file sizes on this are absolutely ridiculous. Something I've noticed too, to get on a 128 gigabyte card, to get more than an hour of footage, I have to shoot in ProRes Proxy. ProRes Proxy is okay. I wouldn't recommend that as a format to edit in. You're almost better off, shooting the compressed 150 megabit 10-bit on a GH5 over using ProRes Proxy. And the above ProRes LT, that's actually pretty decent, but I guess the difference in quality from Proxy to LT is so much that you really need to use LT as a minimum in this camera, and the file sizes are just so big. Do you really want to have a wedding that's a few terabytes? And that's another reason run and gun. If you want to do a wedding and you have the space to do a few terabytes, do it. But if you don't, there's other cameras. Although they're compressed codecs in H.264, it's gonna save a lot of space. And now I'm all for having the best codecs possible. That's why I got this thing. But there's a time for balance, and when you're run and gun, you're doing things where sometimes space is part of that run and gun. Maybe you only have a terabyte drive on you, and that terabyte drive is supposed to last you a few days. With this camera, that terabyte drive is not going to last you a few days. It's going to last you like a few hours. So just be careful. Let's see. Fantastic review. Thank you, Amar. I'm still waiting on my pre-order in Toronto, Canada. Do you recommend this camera to shoot music videos? Absolutely. Make sure we got battery power on this. So anyways, yes. To shoot music videos, absolutely we recommend using this camera. Because with music videos, for the most part, you're setting everything up. And you also want the utmost image quality. 100%. If you're shooting a music video, again, a documentary, feature, short film, this camera is the best thing to use. This is basically my poor man's red. It does a lot. I am using a speed booster with Canon glass, but the size of this screen. I mean, here, let me put this back on here because I don't have to have it off to show you guys the thing anymore. So let's pop this on. The other thing too, when I spoke about the weight earlier, I mean, look at this. It is so light that I have this actually mounted to the speed booster, which is mounted to my cage. And it's light enough to where it's actually not putting too much stress on the mount itself or the speed booster. So that's a really big benefit to it being light. When I was talking earlier about the camera being light and feeling a little cheap, huge benefit. So let's turn this puppy on. Sorry about that. Sorry guys, this is a little run and gun. I really intended this to be a test live stream of, I'm just gonna go on this. I'm using the Zcam E1, an old camera that's discontinued, but it's micro four thirds and shoots 4K. It's like the size of a GoPro, but I'm testing to see how it does in a live stream environment, as some of my work is actually doing live streams of jazz shows and events, and I would love to see how this works as a live stream camera. Ooh, I'm still out of focus. But anyways, yeah, that's why, let's put me back in. Anyways, that's why I'm testing this camera. As you can see, it actually looks pretty decent. This is only a 1080p live stream, but this is a another point I guess I should bring up, one of the disappointing things about the Blackmagic is it only outputs 1080p over the HDMI. It's uncompressed 1080p, but in a few years, 4K live streams for me are going to be a big deal. And this, because it only outputs 1080p, will not work in my live streaming environment. Right now it will, while most things are 1080, but future proofing, it won't. The GH5, the A7S, Sony series, I believe the XT2 from Fuji, they all output 4K, and in the long run, that's going to be a really good. It's going to be good for live streaming or for anyone that needs to output a 4K signal. I've used an ADD, but never used the autofocus or peaking because I don't trust it for professional work. 100%. I am with you. I don't typically use autofocus, but when I brought up the autofocusing earlier for like run and gun type work, when you're in a wedding scenario and you're on the go in an event scenario, autofocus is key. I've seen a lot of people make cinema out of wedding videos and event videos. They do really good ones. So I'm not saying it's not cinematic work when you do that, but the autofocus just helps so much when you're moving so quick, because sometimes you're trying to get a shot and the autofocus will help you nail critical focus versus you having to be on it all the time, making sure, you're focused in, doing this, doing that. I typically, for most of my work, use manual focus, but that's again because I'm setting up everything. I know what the shots are going to be. So when I'm doing my manual focus, or I'm shooting subjects that manual focus is easy and it's doable, 100%. I'm always on manual focus. And to be fair, even when I use the GH5, I'm still using a Metabones. So that means autofocus is even worse than with native glass. I don't really use autofocus that much, but I also don't really shoot too much events or weddings anymore. When I was shooting events and weddings, autofocus was really helpful for me, and that's basically where that little adage comes in. Which adapter would you recommend? What about Viltrox? So, I harped on this a little bit earlier. Peaking sometimes, but that's on the BM. Yep, peaking helps. To speak to the peaking really quick, I did stop peaking when it comes to the GH5. The peaking is pretty decent on this screen, but let me actually talk about the screen for a second. The screen on the Blackmagic is so good that I actually tend not to need peaking at all. When I'm shooting subjects, the screen, the quality on the screen is just so crisp. When I'm on critical focus, I tend not to even need a push in or a peaking. For me, the peaking almost gets in the way, but the peaking does work and it works fantastic. So anybody who wants peaking, it works great. And it actually lets you choose a few different colors. One thing I will point out, go into the monitor real quick. There's two different peaking modes on here. I believe it's actually in setup. Is it in setup? Sorry, give me one sec. I was in monitor. Oh, it's on both. That's why. So this camera has two modes for focus assist. There's peak and there's colored lines. Believe it or not, it's not what it sounds like. Peak is not focus peaking to what you're used to. Colored lines is actually the focus peaking you're used to. And when you click colored lines, it gives you the option of focus color. So you can kind of cycle through. There's red, there's green, there's blue, and there's white, and there's black. And I believe that's it. Yep, that's it. Peak is just white, and it's a little bit different. So I personally, if you're going to use peaking, make sure you use colored lines. The peak is much harder to use. Message retracted. Okay. Sorry, guys. Give me one sec. Didn't realize the camera shut off. Sorry about that, guys. We are back. One of the things I was actually doing as well was testing out the battery capacity of the Zcam. And actually, the internal battery of this thing lasts pretty long, but obviously it's been on for about an hour. So the battery of this thing hits about an hour. Now it's in AC plugs. But let me move on to the next. So what adapter would you recommend? What about Viltrox? Okay, so let me get back to Viltrox. So I am currently actually using a Viltrox right now. The Viltrox, in my opinion, is great for the money. It does have a few issues, and mainly the issues are lens compatibility issues. So if you have a Sigma 18 to 35, works amazing. Some of the other lenses I've tested, the 70 to 200 2.8 from Canon works decent. However, let me grab this. My workhorse telephoto is actually this f4 70 to 200. Besides the fact that it's a fraction of the price of the 2.8s, it's much lighter. So when I'm on the go, I typically don't need the crazy depth of field from the 2.8. Not that it's as crazy as the Sigma, but I need the lightness and I need the compactness, so I use the f4 most of the time. When I first got the Viltrox, the f4 did not work properly at all. They came out with a firmware update and it made it better, but there's still issues. If you leave autofocus on with this lens on the Viltrox, it goes crazy in the camera. It goes black, it does weird things. Where I'm getting at with this is if you choose the Viltrox, do the research with what lenses you're actually going to use with it, and make sure that your lenses are compatible with the Viltrox. It is compatible with a decent amount, but I would say the difference between Viltrox and Metabones, besides the price, is that Metabones, for the most part, seems to be compatible with all electronic EF lenses, whether it's from Sigma, Takina, Canon. It seems to be very compatible with pretty much anything I put on it, whereas the Viltrox has not. But then again, it's $650 for a Metabones versus like $200 or less. Some places even have them for $150 for a Viltrox. So again, it really just depends on your lens selection. If you're using an 18 to 35 and that's your only lens, you're 100% good. With the Blackmagic and with other Micro Four Thirds, it's been great with that. The other thing I will note is that autofocus does not work, even pushed autofocus does not work with the Viltrox yet. It does work with some of the Metabones. Also, image stabilization, for whatever reason, does not seem to work with Canon lenses that have image stabilization with the Viltrox. It's not a camera thing though. I have tested Micro Four Thirds lenses that have image stabilization and they work fine. So there we go. Are you Kevin Owens' brother? No, I am not Kevin Owens' brother. When did you order? I actually ordered, I believe, the first day of NAB. When the camera first came out, that's when sorry, I'm making sure I'm on critical focus here. Oh, sorry about that nastiness. This camera, as you can see, has some peaking, and I forgot that was on. But I ordered, I believe, the first day, so I guess it was April 9th. It was like right at NAB. They basically announced the camera, I think on the 8th, and then the next day all of the retailers had it available. The reason I ordered first was because I had the Blackmagic Pocket, and again, it was an amazing camera. It had its shortcomings as well, but it was an amazing camera, and I remembered how long the waiting list was. Normally, I'm not the first to rush into a camera and be first because there tends to be issues with certain cameras when they're first released. However, with a camera like the Blackmagic, I have a few documentaries coming up that I haven't started filming yet. So before I started using the GH5s and renting some other cameras, I wanted to see if I got this in time, would this be viable to use for my cameras? Because I would obviously love to use a $1,300 Blackmagic Pocket camera over going out and renting a Red every shoot that I do. I didn't really need the Red, but I wanted to have at least a camera that shot RAW. And the fact that this camera not only shoots RAW, but with the dual ISO, you know, I can expose this camera in certain situations with a lot less lighting than you would normally need for like a GH5 or an A7R. A7S obviously beats it, but I mean, the amount of low light on this camera, I basically shoot up to 6400. 6400 is a little bit of grain, but it can be cleaned up very easily with neat. Above 6400 I don't use, but the low light has just been amazing. How is the handheld footage from the camera? It depends on what you're using. So, for instance, handheld footage with this at 18 on the Sigma 18 to 35 is pretty decent. Of course, there's some shake in it, but it's natural shake. It's nothing too crazy. I would say with this camera, the more telephoto you go, obviously the more shake is going to come out. So I wouldn't recommend, going handheld with anything telephoto. But if you're using a Sigma 18 to 35, if you're even using, I had the Takina is actually on this camera, but the Takina, the 11 to 16 handheld's great. Believe it or not, one lens that is actually decent handheld that I did some testing with is this, the 25 mil Lumix. By no means is it like a professional lens, but the image quality that it produces and the fact that it has autofocus for some of my cameras that have autofocus, pretty decent. And I was doing a lot of handheld with this lens just to kind of test it out. And again, there was some natural shake, but as long as you hold it in the right way, you can get some beautiful handheld images out of this camera. One thing I will note, a lot of people complain about the flipping screen and not being on there. For me, that's not really that big of an issue because when I need to use this big screen, I'm typically in a situation where I can look at the screen and it's fine. What I am starting to miss, which you can work around, is an EVF. A lot of the times when I'm handheld and I'm using the GH5 to get the super steady shots, especially because of the stabilizer, I'll hold it to my eye. I've got, like, if I'm even doing this, I'm kind of holding, I've got some nice balance points. And it is a little bit harder to find the balance points on this camera, but it's not impossible. So handheld's definitely not impossible. Again, it's one of those things where it depends on what you're doing handheld. If you need a lot of if there's a lot of variables going on, it may not be the best. But if you can control the camera and you can get the best out of what you need it to be in those handheld situations, it will work. It absolutely will work. Let's see. We're at doesn't show. We're at 32 minutes, a lot longer than I expected to go. If you guys have any other questions, bring them on. If not, I'm probably going to end this. And want to thank you guys all for, coming on, interacting with me, helping me test out the stream, making sure it works. Also, thank you, Indian Studio, for letting me know when the camera turned off, because believe it or not, this camera, it's hard. I can't see it from here. I have to step up, but it has a digital reader on the top. So I couldn't see that it was actually off. So I hope I wasn't off for too long. Give you guys a few minutes. Let's see if I have any other thoughts about this camera. I talked about the HDMI. Oh, one thing I didn't talk about was the audio. So I have not been able to properly test the XLR because it uses an XLR Mini. I actually have a lot of XLR Mini cords, but they're not the right cords I need to go from like XLR Mini to proper XLR. Nor do I have any XLR Mini cords that go to 3.5 millimeter, the headphone jack. So what I did test was I tested the 3.5 millimeter jack right here. One little quirk I will mention to you guys. Let's see. When you go into the camera, you're probably not going to be able to see this well, but if you get your camera and you're looking at this at a later time, you can kind of just go through it with me. If you go into the menu and you go over to audio, in order to get the best audio out of the 3.5 millimeter jack, when you select what source you're going to use, you actually need to use 3.5 millimeter mic, and you need to do that on both. So you need to do 3.5 millimeter left mic, and then you need to go over here and you need to do 3.5 millimeter right mic. If you do that, you're actually going to get pretty decent audio, again, depending on your source, but as long as your source is great, you're going to get pretty decent audio out of the 3.5 millimeter. The reason I bring that up is there is a 3.5 millimeter line option, and if you do that, you're not going to get the best audio. A friend of mine actually somehow got his camera much earlier than everyone else from Adorama, and he pre-ordered way late, like 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. He didn't do any deals with them. Don't know how he got the camera so quick, especially when I see other people commenting that they've pre-ordered the day, like the 10th and the 11th, and they still haven't gotten their camera, but he has it. He was having issues with the line, the mic line anyways, and I figured I'd let you guys know that, just because as soon as we found that solution and he switched it to 3.5 millimeter mic and not line, all of those audio problems went away, and so he was actually fine with using the 3.5 millimeter versus the XLR, just because where we live, we live north of Miami. So in Miami, there's some areas that you can get things like the proper XLR cords and everything, but up north of Miami, it's hard. There's not as many camera stores that have kind of the stuff we need, so it's an online ball game from here. Let's see. So no more questions. All right. So going through this, let's see. Is there anything else that I haven't touched? I touched the audio. I touched the charging. I guess the only thing I haven't spoken about that has to do with the charging is the one last thing that's coming in this week. I actually have this V-mount dummy power brick. And what this is for is you actually hook up the big Sony NPF batteries. So I have a few of these. These are the NPF 970s. They're 6600 mAh. So get a few of these and hook it up to this power brick, and theoretically, I should be getting around 4 to 5 hours of power. The reason I say theoretically is I ordered the D-tap to 2.5 millimeter adapter so I can use my little cord that if you scroll back to the beginning of this video, you can see the cord that I kind of spliced together for this camera. This should give you, a considerable amount of battery power. I actually have these two plates, and these plates basically you can put an NPF battery on them and it outputs 2.5 millimeter DC. But the problem I've noticed, for whatever reason, when I hook it up to the camera, in order for them to work properly, doesn't seem to be enough pressure on the plate. So literally, I have to push down on the plate to get the power on the camera to work, and that's obviously not a workable solution. I don't think it's the battery, because I use these on my Atomos devices. I use them on my lights. They work fine. It just seems to be these small rig plates. And to be fair, I've never really been able to get them to work that great. So, they're just kind of here, probably going to be in the garbage soon. But they were cheap. They were like $10, maybe $15 a piece. I forget why I got two. I think I got two on accident a while ago. But this is a way to power the battery if you need to do it externally. And does a dummy battery work? So earlier in the video, I spoke about battery issues. Yes, a dummy battery works. However, the problem I've had with the dummy batteries, the dummy battery I used got stuck in the camera, and I've seen reports of others with their dummy batteries getting stuck in the camera. And, unfortunately, it seems that when the batteries get stuck in this camera, it's not just a matter of, figuring out how to get the camera out. It seems like it damages something on the inside when it gets stuck. Again, I had to send my camera in for service. This is my second camera from Blackmagic, because my first one had to go in, and I guess the minor things that happened to it were such a pain that they had to RMA me a new one. I don't recommend using the dummy battery, the Canon dummy battery, in all honesty. I'd recommend, either wait for the cords to come out from Blackmagic. They're supposed to come out in November, and they're the proper cords that hook up to the AC adapter. It comes with a cord that goes to 2.5 millimeter. It comes with a cord that goes into D-tap, just like this. And it also comes with an actual cord that you can splice and make your own, which was actually where I got the idea just to splice the power adapter, as I just spliced the power adapter, cut it off from the brick, and made my own from the cord that they supplied. Again, only recommend doing that if you have the experience or know somebody who does. So kind of use the dummy batteries at your own risk. They do work, but you could potentially damage the camera. Just to harp on what I said earlier, when I used one, I had a weird line form in the screen, and it was not properly charging batteries through the AC. The AC was working, but it wasn't properly charging them, and the light all of a sudden on the top next to on and off right here that goes green and red, for whatever reason the light wasn't working anymore after I put in the dummy battery. So just be careful. Maybe there's a part you can shave off to not get it stuck. It doesn't seem to just be the dummy batteries. It seems to be certain third-party batteries. I don't know what it is, because a lot of people were saying that it was from the batteries swelling up from use. I'm going to put that to rest right now and let you know that whenever I've put a third-party battery in here, before I even turn the camera on, I would slide the battery in and test to see if it came out. And I've had a few that wouldn't come out. So they were batteries that were charged the day previously, so there was no swelling from charging. They were not used for almost 24 hours, and I did the tests, and half the batteries were stuck in there. Now, any of the batteries that were stuck were all third-party batteries. None of them were the proper Canon batteries or the Blackmagic, but they did get stuck. I don't know what it is. I'm assuming there's something in the process where maybe in order to make them cheaper, they add like a little thing in there. And for Canon cameras, it doesn't seem to make a difference, because obviously I haven't really seen these types of reports done. What I would like to see, and I don't know if it's really going to happen, but if battery manufacturers start getting the reports that like, hey, your Canon LPE6 battery gets stuck and there's something that's going on, and if they don't have the resources to change their batteries to fix it, they should come out with disclaimers basically saying that these are for Canon cameras only and they're not for the Blackmagic Pocket camera. They'll save everyone a lot of headache, because it's unfortunate. I'm seeing people having these issues in the Facebook groups, and I'm seeing YouTube videos about it. And it's just not cool, especially, you get this camera, there's not many of them out right now, and you put the wrong battery in, and then it ruins the camera. It's kind of like, well, that just took the fun out of it. It's not the best. All right. So let's see. Any other questions? If you guys have any other questions, look, keep going. If not, I'll stop this here, and I'll do a live stream in a few days once I'm in like a nicer t-shirt, and I've got some more use. But basically, I've used this camera in total for about 2 weeks. The reason it's not 3 weeks, even though I got the camera literally first of the pre-orders, was that week that I had to send the camera in and it came back. But I've used the camera all this week. I used it the entire first week I had it. It's been great. One thing to tell Indian Studio, actually, now that I remember, I'm glad that I'm still here. I noticed that on the Sigma 18-35, using the Viltrox adapter, there was some chromatic aberration and some like purple fringing when wide open. When at I guess it's 1.8, but with the speed boosted value, it's 1.2. So I've noticed some chromatic aberrations and just weird stuff. It doesn't look that bad. Some people may like it because it kind of gives your footage like a vintage flair. But if you're not looking for that and you're looking for sharper, more clinically sharp footage, be aware of that. That wide open, it does have that look. And I guess the one thing I'm going to close the stream out on, because it's something that really impressed me and I forgot to talk about it. The Blackmagic actually does f-stop increases in 0.1s. So for instance, I'm here, I'm at 1.2. It literally will let you do 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, etc. And I've never really had a camera that I've been able to actually fine tune the f-stop like that unless it was a D-clicked aperture. So I love the fact that with this, when I normally use like the GH5 or even on my Canon cameras, you know, I'm at 1.2, or on the Canon cameras, I'm at like 1.8, and then it goes to like 2.0, and then like 2.2. It's typically every few stops, but you could literally fine tune the exact f-stop you want, which for me was super cool. So anyways, I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. For anyone who did not tune in for the live stream, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. As I'm working on my documentaries, I'm getting a lot of, you know, hands-on experience with the camera and some of the other cameras. So I will be doing more of these. I'm typically going to do more of a live stream format instead of doing these pre-recorded videos, as unfortunately doing the pre-recorded videos, although they can look a lot better, they do take a lot of time. And, you know, as with today, I have a shoot in about 45 minutes. I'm pretty much all packed up, but you know, it's just easier to do this, and I can kind of take your questions on here. And some of the live streams I actually will do pre-recorded small segments, and I'll just add them into the live stream as part of it. But without me rambling on, my name's Jeff Fagan, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. And